Assalamu alaikum wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wal aqibatu lil muttaqin wa salatu wa salamu ala sayyidina al mursalin. If you guys think you guys want to turn the lights off, it's up to you guys. Alright, so yesterday we had stopped at bowing position for women, and sorry, qawma, that means after we stand up from the ruku' and what is known as qawma. Today inshallah we'll be transitioning from the qawma to the sajda position. So just as last time we discussed certain aspects of transitioning from one to another, we mentioned that the Allahu Akbar takbir should be audible to one's own self. Number two, that when a person says the takbir, then he should start from post movement starting. So as soon as you move away from the previous posture, and it should stop before you get into the next posture. So those aspects kept in mind, when going into sajda from a standing position, this is the sequence that we should follow. So number one, as we go, our knees should touch the ground first, then our hands, then the nose, and finally the forehead. So in sequence of how our body moves pretty much, our knees will go down first. Ideally speaking, our knees should continue to be on top of our thighs as we go down. So if we don't need support, and most of us are quite young and should not be an issue, but if we are elderly, it's understood that to take support, etc. Then the hands, and then the nose, and then the head. In the same manner, as we go down, our back should stay as straight as possible, which is not mentioned here, but I'm mentioning that it should stay as straight as possible. To note, however, according to Shafi'iyya, that their hands will actually have to touch the ground first and then the knees. So they'll go down first like this, hands will go first, and then their knees will touch the ground. So if you notice some people doing that, sometimes it may not be that they need support, but that's how it is in their madhab, that's how they're taught to do it. Those people who raise their hands, just to emphasize to them once again, then whenever they have to raise their hands, it should come up to the shoulders, not by the chest, not by the stomach, but rather up by the shoulders at least. That is the minimum raising of the hands that needs to be done for anyone who is of that, following any madhab of that opinion. Once we have reached the sujood, remember a lot of these I'll not be demonstrating at this time, because inshallah we'll have a demonstrative version after we finish go through all the theoreticals at the moment. The two prostrations. Once we get into sajda, we understood the first our knee will touch, then our hands will touch, then our nose will touch, and our forehead will touch. If a person does not touch the floor with any one of these 8 parts, then either his sajda is completely invalid, or in the case of the nose, if the nose is not touching, then the salah is deficient, and thus the salah will have to repeat it or compensate in another way. So forehead, what are the 8 parts that needs to be touching the ground? Number 1, the forehead. Nose. Number 2, both hands, both knees, and both toes. Now, at any point, if both of any one part are lifted off the ground, that means both of the feet are off the ground, both of the hands are off the ground, so in the case of the head, both the forehead and the nose are off the ground, so then the salah has now become invalid, or you could say that sajda has now become invalid. A person will have to do one more sajda. However, if only one of them is lifted, as long as not lifted for the entire rukn, that means the amount, what is a rukn? Now, this is a concept we did not discuss. However, an important concept throughout salah is the amount of a rukn. What is regarded as amount of rukn? Amount of rukn is regarded any amount of time which a person needs to say subhanallah. Now, it's not a specific amount of time. It's not 3 seconds, not 5 seconds. Each person's recitation, normal recitation, not a super slow recitation and nor a super fast recitation. Person saying subhanallah, however long it takes for a person to say subhanallah 3 times is regarded as the amount of a rukn. So if a person's leg or foot is lifted off the ground for the amount of an entire rukn, it will also invalidate that what? That sajda. It will invalidate that sajda. Is everyone clear on it? I'll repeat that one more time. All 7 parts of the body need to be on the ground, or rather 8 parts of the body need to be on the ground. If any one of a pair is lifted for the amount of one rukn, then a person will have to compensate for it later on. However, if both parts of the of a pair are lifted at the same time, then entire sajda is invalid, and another sajda needs to be done within the salah for that salah to be valid. If a person doesn't do so, then the entire salah is rendered invalid because it is missing one of the essential, or rather required parts of salah. Everyone clear on that? Yes? Then, the posture. Number one, which direction should our fingers and toes be? During the sajda, for men and women, women will be slightly different. We'll talk about it in the next slide. The fingers and toes will all be facing what? The qibla. So they'll not be like this, where different fingers will be going different direction, nor should they be completely close, but normally on the ground, where they'll be positioned next to the ears. Next to the ears. So it will not be up front, not be back by the shoulders, but where? Next to the ears, parallel to the ears on the ground. They'll be facing the qibla. Number two, no, elbows and arms will be away from the body. Again, this is for men. The next slide will be for this, exclusively for women, away from the body. Now, in jama'ah, obviously, because everyone is so close to each other, what will have to happen is, to accommodate each other, you may have to keep it close. But as long, if you have the space, when you're praying your sunnats or nafil, or if you're the imam, then they should be spread out, as much as the hadith of Rasulullah describes, that a baby sheep, you call it? That's what you call it? A baby sheep is able to go and walk through under a person's while he's making a sajda. That's the stomach's position. The stomach should be away from the thighs. The stomach should be away from the thighs. The leg and the back should be straight. Thighs straight and back straight. Inshallah, we'll demonstrate this better once we are doing the demonstration. So thighs will be straight and the back will be as straight as possible. So you should not be curving the back, unless obviously space is so little. And sometimes, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless those people who are very tall, when they're trying to fit into the sufuf, then they may have to curl in. Otherwise, back should also be straight. Generally, now, gaze generally down or towards the nose. When you're in sajda, generally down, wherever your gaze falls as it looks down, not from the corner, not looking to the sides, but generally down, or if someone wants to be more specific, directly towards the nose. The prostration of women slightly differs. Okay, remember, we talked about the main factor in the prostration, any posture of a woman, is her concealment. So to be as concealed as possible. Fingers and toes will still be facing the qibla as much as possible. Remember, because she will be coming down, her toes to be facing the qibla will be a little bit more difficult, right? Arms should be placed close to the body. So unlike the men who will be going like this, they'll keep their arms close to themselves, right? And number three, stomach position close to the thighs, to modesty, to ensure modesty. Keep the body compact and gathered. Generally down or towards the nose, the gaze will be same place as the men's. A few questions that come: should the woman's arms be touching the floor? Yesterday we mentioned a clear text from Ali radiallahu anhu, that when he mentions that a woman's arms will be touching the floor, and thus their stomach will also be touching the thighs, and they will be holding themselves as compact, as close as possible. So this is the difference between the men and women's sujood. Once a person sits or does the first sajda, he or she will have to come up for what we know as the jalsa, the short sitting. When a person comes up from the jalsa, they will come up in the same sequence or the opposite sequence as they had got down. When they were going down, it was knee, then hands, then nose, and then forehead. Now he'll come up forehead, then nose, and then hands. The hands will be placed, and he or she will say takbir audibly to themselves. The positions of the hand will be on the lower thigh, on the lower part of the thigh towards the knee. That's where the hands will be placed. Some scholars are of the opinion you may hang it over the knees, etc. However, the most common opinion is that it should be placed on the lower part of the thighs before the knees. The gaze should be on your lap or on the place of sajda, either on the place of sajda or on your lap. Come to complete still position, as we mentioned when we got up from our ruku' and before we went to our sajda, we had to be completely still. In this position also, we need to come to a complete standstill. While in jalsa, now the easiest way to ensure that we are not too fast is to read any kind of tasbih or any kind of dua between the two sajdas. That's the easiest way to ensure we're not going too fast. Once we have come to a complete standstill, we shall read Rabbi ghfirli. Some books of hadith mention Rabbi ghfirli wa li waliday. Some books of hadith mention Rabbi ghfirli wa li waliday. Forgive me, my Lord, or forgive me, my Lord, and forgive my parents. The other one is, which is a little bit lengthier, and I prefer it, Allahumma ghfirli warhamni wahdini wajiburni wa'afini warzuqni warfa'ni. Now, this hadith comes, this is actually a combination of 3 different hadith. A combination of how many hadith? 3 different hadiths. Each one of those hadiths are missing one of the words. So this kind of gathers all of the words. So some scholars will read Allahumma ghfirli warhamni wa'afini wahdini warzuqni wasturni wajburni warfa'ni, adding a few extra words, subtracting a few other words. Any version of the hadith that appears, if you read it, it is acceptable. That's the idea. If you want to combine all 3, go ahead. If you want to read only one hadith, go ahead. This is one of the 3 narrations over here. This is one of the 3 narrations, and subhanAllah, if you look at it, this combines every aspect that a person requires in this world and the akhirah. As if to say, between 2 sajdas, I'm begging Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give and fulfill all my general needs in this dunya and the akhirah. That ends us, and obviously after that you'll go back into sajda. You'll go back into sajda. One part I did not mention over here in my slides is once you go into the second sajda and you come up for the second rak'ah, what will happen is you will come up from a sajda position all the way up to a standing position. And this, you will go and come back and opposite to the sequence where you went down. So again, what will happen? Forehead up, then nose, then hands, then knees, and you come back up. And ideally, you should come up with your back straight, not back bend down. One thing I want to mention, you will notice some people again, that they sit before. So they'll come from sajda, they'll sit for a moment, and then they'll stand up again. Remember, this is an emphasized sunnah, part of some of the other madhahib. So this they have to do. And in our case, we are not allowed to do. If a person accidentally sits, as long as he has not recited any full sentence, is fine. He does not have to do any sajda, so he does not have to compensate anyway. However, if a person sits and he reads Allahumma salli ala Muhammad, till Muhammad is a complete sentence. Till Muhammad is a complete sentence. So if he has read only Allahumma or Allahumma salli, then it is still fine. He doesn't have to compensate anyway. But as soon as he says what? Allahumma salli ala Muhammad, he has uttered a complete sentence, and this will be regarded as delay, which we'll talk about inshallah at a later stage. So he will stand up and proceed with the next rak'ah, which will be similar to the first rak'ah. Once a person, one more thing. Methods of sitting in prayer. Now, before we go into actual sitting position, because this will apply, the sitting positions will apply between the 2 sajdas as well as the final sitting in the salah. There's 2 methods of sitting. Now, in the Hanafi school of thought, each one of the 2 positions are dedicated to either the men or the woman. That's how it's divided in the Hanafi school of thought. So, for the men, we call this the iftirash. What is the iftirash position? You put the right foot upright, the toes will be facing the qibla, it will be almost next to your buttocks. Left foot laying flat, going towards the right, and buttocks resting on top of the left foot. This is how the men will sit. I tried to make an ideal diagram, but unfortunately none of the AIs were doing it properly, so that's why we're going to have to show it. We're going to do it later on. There's someone and there's someone to do in the ladies, we'll do it over here, inshallah. For the woman's position, tawarruk, it's called tawarruk, where both the feet come out on the right side, buttocks resting on the ground, more compact as modest position, right? They should be as close to each other as, not each other, to themselves, and contracting themselves as much as possible. One thing that I did not write over here, but when a person is sitting for either one of the sitting positions, then he should keep his back straight. Backs straight, not slumping for men. For men, they should keep their back straight, hands on their knees, not on their knees, but right before the knees, and the arms ideally straight if possible. It gives a more position that is more alert, a more alert position rather than a slouching position. Now we come to the qada akhira, which is the last posture within a salah. Now, how long are we required to sit for the Qa'dah Akhira? You must sit in the final Qa'dah for at least the duration. Remember, key is duration, not actual recitation. Key is duration, not actual recitation, which is fard. Understand? Now, the actual recitation of it is wajib, which we will discuss on a later time. It takes to recite the tashahhud. This ensures the conclusion is properly observed. End of prayer. The sitting must be performed at the conclusion of prayer to complete it properly. It is the final pillar before offering salam. This is important. Listen, the next part explains it. If you forgot something and went back to correct it during prayer, you must repeat the qa'dah at the end of the prayer to ensure validity. And this is the reason, inshallah, we'll discuss what we know as sajdatul sahw, right? Our sajdatul sahw is actually very similar to other madhabs' sajdatul sahw. The only difference is that they do not require us to repeat the qa'dah again. In their madhabs, they do not require the qa'dah to be repeated again. In our madhab, because we understand the qa'dah akhira to be what? The last posture. So it must be repeated to maintain that end posture as the last posture to be performed before the end of salah, and that is why we have to repeat it. So that part is not necessarily part of the sajda sahw, but is so it can become the last posture. This brings us to the end of what we know as the arkan. That means all those postures in salah or placed in salah which are required, and if any of them are not performed, then what happens? Our salah will be completely null and void, as if we have not performed the salah. The next few slides will be discussing a few more aspects regarding Qa'dah Akhira. Qa'dah Akhira. In Qa'dah Akhira, what should be recited? Tahiyyat should be recited. This is wajib, and again we'll deal with the wajib shortly. One second. Durood, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad kama sallaita ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim innaka Hamidum Majid. This is the one that is preferred in the Hanafi madhab. The durood has approximately 22 different variations, so to say, that's to be recited in salah. And each madhab have their preferences, and the preference within ours is this one. The dua after that, any authentic dua may be recited after the tashahhud and durood. So at the end, you can technically recite anyone. The Hanafi preference is Allahumma inni zalamtu nafsi. Why do we have this preference? Because Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu was the one that recommended to us. So we felt the best of humanity after the Anbiya alayhimu salatu wasalam was Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. That's why we take his preference. The Shafi'iyah have a different choice of dua to be read at the end of salah, and they have their reasoning for choosing the dua that they have chosen. Now, if we are sitting there and the imam is still reading more and more and more, then we can have any choice of dua that from the Quran or the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to continue on reading. We may also repeat some of the du'as we have already read. Listen, and the shortest one is رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ حَسَنَةً وَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ, which is all-encompassing dua. It covers every aspect of goodness within our life. So that's a very commended dua as well. Continuation Qa'dah Akhira. This is pretty much what I mentioned, what I just said. One may read additional supplication before the salam, preferably the ones found in the Sunnah traditions. Right. One more aspect is the lifting of the finger. I did mention the lifting of the finger, by the way, yesterday. And while reciting tashahhud, in the Hanafi school of thought, you will make a circle with your middle finger and your thumb, and the rest of it will just follow along on your position. And then you lift your finger at the time of La ilaha. So the whole point of lifting the finger, according to Hanafi school of thought, is to say no. Is to what? To emphasize the no. That there is no deity. And when you say illallah, basically you're affirming Allah within your heart. That's why you put it down. So La ilaha illallah. Right? Now, and the other school of thought I mentioned yesterday also, according to Shafi'is, and you'll pick it up at the same time, La ilaha. You'll pick it up illallah. Where will you pick it up? Illallah, and they'll just hold it up all the way till the end of tashahhud, end of salah basically, and they'll drop it when they say salam. The Hanbali school of thought, they say you'll pick it up every time you say Allah. So at-tahiyyatu lillahi wa salawatu wa tayyibat assalamu alayka ayyuhan nabiy wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and every time the name of Allah is taken, you'll lift it up. The Malikiyah say that you will lift it up and keep it lifted, and you will move your finger left and right. And for every time you have the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so it will stay up the entire time from the beginning, and you'll move it left and right instead of up and down. So these are different forms. So if you find someone in your masjid doing so, you can't really criticize him for following his madhab. Okay, salam, the exit. Now, the salam, to explain this in a little bit more detail. Okay, so before we continue, as I was mentioning earlier, that qada akhira pretty much ends all the arkan within salah. The last thing that's left is salam. Now, salam in itself, as we'll discuss a little bit a while later, salam itself is wajib. However, the intent of ending the salah is fard. Everyone, stay with me. The intent of ending the salah is fard. What does that mean? To understand it best, let's take an example, right? Let's say a person is praying salah and someone walks in, right? And as the person walks in, maybe he has great respect for this person. He says, Assalamu alaikum rahmatullah. To whom? To the brother. Now, because technically he has not ended his salah, he just broke his salah. What did he just do? He just broke his salah. Why? Because he has not technically ended his salah. However, while saying Assalamu alaikum, if he intended by this salam, I also ending my salah, he has not broken his salah. His salah is complete and nothing needs to be repeated. Are you guys with me? The only difference between the first and second scenario is in the first scenario, he had no intention of breaking his salah. In the second scenario, he had intentionally broken his salah to end his salah, and thus that intention is necessary. Let's take another example. Let's say a person, has finished his at-tahiyyat, he's sitting there, and let's say he's in the middle of his durood. As he's performing his durood, what happens? He feels the urge to pass some wind. And before he can make the intention to break his salah, what happens? He passes some wind. What will happen? His salah will be broken, and his salah will have to be what? His salah will have to be repeated, because he did not end his salah, right? However, right before he passed wind, if he actively made an intention and made any kind of movement or any kind of utterance which is combined with what? With the intent to end the salah, then his salah will have been ended, and his passing the wind will not have broken his salah, and that salah will not have to be repeated. Are you guys with me? Listen. So in simple, any kind of action with the intent of breaking the salah needs to happen to end the salah at the end. Yes, everyone with me? Inshallah. Now, so what I will do today is, inshallah, I will take a few questions. Oh no, does anyone have access to the office? Anyone have access to the office? Is anybody? Office got access to us? Yes, Hassan has. Okay, can you get the other laptop and see if there are any questions there? Okay. So before we go on to the next part, I'll take any questions, and then we'll go on to the next part, which is the wajibat. No questions. No questions. It's not required. Required. It can be recommended if a person joins and there's enough time he knows he's going to get the ruku'. It can be recommended, but it's not required. Yes. Yes. No salah. Yes. No. Yes. So you may say two Allahu Akbar. So remember, one Allahu Akbar is fard, which is takbir tahrima. That has to be said. And then you may say another Allahu Akbar to join the Imam wherever, in whichever posture he is. It's sunnah. Nothing. And even if you don't say Allahu Akbar, it'll still be fine. Why? Because remember, that Allahu Akbar is what? Is sunnah. Yes. So even if a person doesn't say it, then his salah is completely valid. Completely fine, as long you join the Imam before he said Sami Allahu liman hamidah. Yes. All right. I think we're taking time, so inshallah I'll proceed on to the next part, the salam part, while the laptop arrives. Okay, the first salam. Right now, when you say salam, the prayer is concluded with an action concurrent with intention to end the prayer. This is the part I was explaining. The prayer is concluded with an action concurrent with intention to end the prayer. So you have to action together with intention, right? Which is, intention is almost what? Given that I'm trying to end my salah. I will give you I'll give scenario that what might happen. It might not happen intentionally. There's many a times that a person is sitting behind the imam, and a person is not paying attention to salah at all. He's just kind of like everyone else is moving, he's also moving. It's just like an automation. And so when the imam says assalamu alaikum, he's also said assalamu alaikum, and then he realizes, oh, salah ended. Listen. And so listen, that would be automation of his prayer, so to say. So if that is the case, listen, because he's following the imam, there's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given a lot of concession when a person is following the imam. So that will be behind the imam, so the entire salah will be valid, inshallah, even if he does something after that. So, however, that is an example that I can think of where a person doesn't necessarily have intention. The first salam to the right. Turn your head to the right with intention of greeting all those on your right. Listen, minimum wording is assalamu alaikum, and anything wa rahmatullah is highly recommended. And there is only one narration to our knowledge where Rasulullah added on wa barakatuh. So it is permissible if a person adds on. Listen, however, it's not required. The second salam, is the same. You make intention for all those on the left. We'll carry on into the wajibat, the necessary actions. So today we'll cover all the wajibat. However, at the end, if a person misses the wajibat, the sajdatul sahw part will be left out for today, inshallah. We'll go in details tomorrow as to how to do the sajdatul sahw. So the wajibat are such that if a person misses out a wajib, then his salah is not necessarily invalid. His salah is still valid. He will not be sinful as if a person has left out a salah. Unlike the fara'id, if a person leaves out any of the fara'id, then a person will have to make it up within the prayer. And let me take this moment to explain what that means actually. So let's say, in the first rak'ah, how many sajdas are you supposed to do? 2. You accidentally did 1 sajda and you got up for the second rak'ah. So you only did 1 sajda. At any point in your salah, so ideally to leave it till the end is the best, but if you don't, it's fine. So let's say in the second rak'ah, in Fajr salah, after you do the 2 sajdas of the second rak'ah, you will just add on a what? Extra sajda, and that's your 3 sajdas completed. Yes, and your salah will be valid. However, you'll have to do sajdatul sahw. And so you'll have to do sajdatul sahw. Another example of it, okay? This is a wajib action, which we'll talk about. A person was supposed to recite Surah Fatiha, let's say in Salatul Dhuhr. In Salatul Dhuhr, you're supposed to recite Surah Fatiha in the first rakat and the second rakat, and the third and the fourth rakat is optional. It's what? Optional. You are not required to recite Surah Fatiha according to Hanafi school of thought in the third and the fourth rakat. So if you forgot in the first rakat, what do? You just recite it in the third rak'ah. So you have to make sure you recite it in the third rak'ah, and that will be replacement of it. Another example of it. For whatever reason, if a person does ruku', instead of doing ruku', he goes straight to sajda. Then in that case, in the second rak'ah, he may do what? He may do 2 rukus, and his salah will be valid. As long as that misstep is made up any time before the qa'da akhira. Before the what? Before the qa'da akhira. Remember, our rule is that the qa'da akhira must be the last part of salah. So if you make up anything, then you have to make up the qa'da akhira once again to ensure that the qa'da akhira is the last posture. Oops. Okay? Does everyone understand? So making up any misposition just means that before the qa'da akhira, that action must be done and the salah will be valid, but you will have to make sajdatul sahw at the end of the salah. Now, wajibat are all those actions, if they're not done, then they can be compensated by sajdatul sahw. They can be compensated by sajdatul sahw. However, if a person does not make sajdatul sahw, now what happens? Inshallah, we'll discuss that with sajdatul sahw tomorrow, inshallah. Right? So first off, the way we have, yes. Yes, that is correct. Yes, that is correct. No. The second rak'ah, because that's what you know as a fard. That's known as a fard. Every aspect of a fard has to be found within the salah for the salah to be valid. So if any part of it is missed, then it will be invalid. For fard. Yes. Or the arkan as we described them. So every one of the arkan are a fard. So leaving out any of the fard as we understood them to be the arkan, then your salah will be completely invalid if they're not somehow made up within the prayer. Yes. Yes, that will come inshallah. So now, the way I have divided the wajibat is we went through posture from each posture, and in each posture we went through the wajibs in those postures. Some of these things may sound repetitive. Why? Because we have already discussed them, not in detail, in those postures specifically. So in takbiratul tahrima, the takbir itself is wajib. So if a person, I don't know why he starts the salah with subhanallah, will the salah start? Yes, it will start, but he will have to sajdat as-sahwa at the end. But it's wajib to say the exact phrase of Allahu Akbar, right? Concluding with the salam, so start with Allahu Akbar and ending with the specific word of Assalamu alaikum. Now if a person decides to say again some other word, so I'm ending the salah, for some reason in English, will salah be ended? Salah will be ended. However, it will be, we'll discuss what to do tomorrow, inshallah, in that case when he does something like that. Inshallah, no one does that, right? Reciting Surah Fatiha. It is necessary to recite Surah Fatiha in 2 rak'ah of fard prayer and every rak'ah of every other prayer. So in 2 rak'ahs, you have to recite Surah Fatiha in fard prayer. Now, Fajr Salah is only 2 rak'ah. Dhuhr Salah is 4, but you only have to recite in 2. Asr, same thing. Maghrib is 3, you have to only recite 2. And Isha is only 2 of the rak'ahs. Reciting additional verses. After Surah Al-Fatiha, at least 3 short verses or 1 long verse from the Quran is necessary. We discussed this in detail yesterday. Extra recitation in fard. For fard prayers, extra verses are only recited in the first 2 rak'ah. This is important. Extra verses are only recited in the first 2 rak'at. In the second 2 rak'at for a 3 or 4 salah rak'ah prayer, there will be no extra recitations. So let's say in Dhuhr, in the first rak'ah will be Fatiha, additional recitation. Fatiha, additional recitation. Third rak'ah, only Fatiha, right? If you want. Fourth rak'ah, only Fatiha, if you want. And that's how the recitation will work. Maintaining the order of recitation. It's important to understand that if you, for some reason, this happens a lot in Taraweeh Salah, right? Imam starts, he's too focused on what to read, and he reads his additional part first. If he tends to do so, and then he recites Surah Fatiha, because of change of order between the surahs, this will necessitate a sajdatul sahw, right? In simple word, any change of sequence in salah between fard or wajib actions will necessitate sajdatul sahw, because sequence is also wajib. Okay. Maintaining sequence is extra verses. Sequential recitation. Now, this is recommended. This is not wajib. However, we're putting it here. Sequential recitation is recommended but not necessary. However, Surah Al-Duha to Surah Al-Nas, maintaining sequence is deemed necessary by many scholars due to the brevity of these chapters, right? So, from Surah Al-Duha till Surah Al-Nas, we should try our best to maintain some sequence. So, if I read Surah Al-Duha, if I read Surah Alam Nashrah, the second rak'ah shouldn't be Surah Al-Duha. And that also means I need to know the sequence of the surahs from Surah Al-Duha onwards as well for me to have that sequence. Additionally, if a person wants to skip a surah, no problem. But you cannot skip only one surah. If you're going to read Surah Al-Duha, the next surah you must read is, you have to skip Surah Alam Nashrah, Surah Al-Teen, and then Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq. Listen, another ideal, this is mustahab, that the first rak'ah should be longer than the second rak'ah. However, we have found within the recitation of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that from Surah Al-Duha till the end, many a times Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam has recited a longer surah in the first rak'ah and a shorter surah in the, a shorter surah in the first rak'ah and longer surah in the second rak'ah, from Surah Al-Duha till Surah Al-Nas. So there's a much leeway in that matter. Yes, again, going back to the wajib aspects, reciting Surah Fatiha, reciting additional verses, sequence between both of those, and then Farz Salah is only in the first 2 rak'ahs. Okay. Going on with recitation, Imam's loud recitation. Now, yesterday we did discuss that there are certain salahs you have to recite loudly, which is called jahr, and sir in those salahs which you have to recite quietly. What if an Imam does the opposite? In a sirri salah, he reads a jahr. And what if a person makes jahr in a, what do you call it? A sir in a jahri salah, right? If a person does it momentarily, this will not this will not necessitate sajdat al-sahw. However, if a person does the entire wajib, for example, a person recites the entire Surah Fatiha, where? In a dhuhr salah, he reads it loudly, then this will necessitate sajdat al-sahw. Everyone understand? So let's say a person starts, he forgets, Alhamdulillah, and he goes quiet. Then will this necessitate sajdat al-sahw? No, it will not necessitate sajdat al-sahw. Or for example, he accidentally goes loud at the end. It will not. However, if a person recites the entire Surah Fatiha loudly, then this will necessitate sajdat al-sahw. Same thing on the opposite. If a person recites entire Surah Fatiha quietly, then it will necessitate sajdat al-sahw. Right? Touching nose and forehead in sujood. And sujood, touching of the forehead on the ground is fard. Is what? Is fard. It's not supposed to be nose and forehead. That was a mistake. I have to correct that. Okay? The nose touching the floor is wajib. The nose touching the ground is wajib. However, the forehead touching the ground is what? Is fard. So if a person keeps his nose up for whatever reason, then this will necessitate sajdat al-sahw. Itmi'nan. Itmi'nan is very important. This is stillness in each posture. This applies to every single posture. Whether you're standing, whether in sajda, whether you're sitting, you have to come to a standstill. If you're not sitting still, or if you just come up and just go and rush into the next position, this will require a sajdat al-sahw. Proper sequence of actions, I already mentioned this earlier. The proper sequence of all fard and wajib actions is also wajib. Thus, if the sequence is changed in any way, in the examples we gave, sajda of the first rak'ah is done in the second rak'ah, then this will require sajda al-sahw. No unnecessary delays. That means, for example, there is no reason to have a unnecessary delay. However, if a person, let's say after Surah Al-Fatiha, he's thinking of what surah to read, and he's standing there, and he's standing there, and he's standing there. So there is a leeway of up to one rukun. Up to how many? One rukun. Which is what? 3 subhanallahs. As soon as a person hits the amount of 3 subhanallahs, it is as if he has added an extra posture into his salah. And thus, then sajdat al-sahw will become necessary. As long as he thinks of something within that 3 subhanallahs, he is good to go. Same thing. He finishes at-tahiyyat, we do not sit there. We will have to move on to next posture as soon as possible. Sometimes a person is lost in thought. He finishes at-tahiyyat in automation mode, and then he's just sitting there, and then he realizes, oh, I'm supposed to go. And he moves. That will necessitate a sajdat al-sahw. Same thing in sajda and any other posture. Sitting in tashahhud rules. The qa'da ula. Now, what is a qa'da ula? Qa'da ula was not discussed earlier. Why? Because it was not one of the arkan. It was not one of the arkan. Qa'da ula only applies to any salah which has more than 2 rak'ahs. It has more than 2 rak'ahs. So, it will be after 2 rak'ahs, you will have to do what you know as qa'da ula. Right? Now, in the recommended method of praying, there is no salah that goes beyond 4 rakats. No salah that goes beyond 4 rakats. However, there might be circumstances where a person reads a 6 rakat salah, which is not going to be discussing in our session. But if a person does so, every 2 rakats that's sitting will be known as a qa'da ula. Will be every 2 rakats will be known as the qa'da ula, and will follow the same rules. So qa'da ula, you will have to sit, and within the qa'da ula, it is wajib not only to sit but also recite the tashahhud. There is an opinion of that at-tahiyyat being what? Sunnah. But the preferred opinion that just like the sitting position itself, the recitation of at-tahiyyat itself is also what, guys? Wajib. It's also wajib. Witr. Okay. Now, that concludes all the wajib positions. Now, there's one more thing that I want to mention that is wajib. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa sallim. Yes. I think it was covered. My apologies. Yes, it was already covered. So that's where we'll conclude till today, inshallah. I'll go over questions for a few minutes, and then inshallah we'll do a practical demonstration from the sajda onwards, inshallah. Okay, there's a question. There's only one new question that I noticed today. I'll go through it one more time. If you do 3 sajdas in the first rak'ah by accident, can you do 1 in the second rak'ah? Then no. Listen, adding additional posture in any way to salah. Listen, okay, I think that's what I was going to mention. Yes. So adding anything into salah, which is not contrary to salah, will not invalidate the prayer, but will necessitate a sajda to sahw. So adding an extra thing to salah, which is not contrary to salah, will necessitate the sajda to sahw and will not break the salah. So for example, doing an extra sajda in salah, is it contrary to salah? No, it's not contradictory or contrary to salah. Thus, all you have to do is what? Sajda to sahw, and your salah is valid. However, if you do something that is not part of salah, let's say you start playing with a stick, or you start playing with the janamaz, or start playing with the carpet, this is contrary to salah, and thus adding in within the salah will break the salah, right? Oh yes, yes. If a person repeats any recitation which is wajib or fard, repeats it, the complete recitation of it, or a majority of it, this will also require sajda to sahw. Example of it, a person recites Surah Al-Fatiha, right? Now, what is how many verses of Surah Al-Fatiha, guys? 7 verses. So a person reads up to the 4th verse and then restarts Surah Al-Fatiha from the beginning again. So because he is reading it again, which a required part of salah, it is as if he is adding an extra part of salah, sajdat al-sahw will become necessary. However, if a person recites Surah Al-Fatiha after, remember this, a person recites Surah Al-Fatiha after the additional surah, he will not have to do sajdat al-sahw, because then that will just count as part of the extra recitation and not as part of the Surah Al-Fatiha. The same, another example of it, a person recites At-Tahiyyat once, and then he recites At-Tahiyyat again in the sin, as long as he's not behind the imam. Behind the imam, it's fine. If he's not behind the imam, then he will have to do sajdat al-sahw. There's another question just came in. Yesterday, this question was asked, but I believe the repeat I'll mention very quickly. What does a person do when praying on the plane? When a person prays on the plane, then he should pray. If they permit standing, that would be ideal. However, if they do not permit standing, then they do not allow you to face the qibla, you pray in whatever position they permit you to. And if they have become an impediment in fulfilling any of the fara'id, and you are naturally not, you don't have any kind of impediment, then you will have to repeat the salah once again once you land. Okay, if we don't have to say Fatiha in the last surah for salah, then what do we do? Or is this only if you're praying behind an imam? No. Even if you're praying by yourself, listen, you are not required to. That does not mean you should not. It is sunnah to recite Surah Al-Fatiha in the second 2 rak'ats, or rather, of fard. However, if a person doesn't do so, salah will still be valid. It is sunnah, and you should recite Surah Fatiha and no additional surah. For some reason, if a person doesn't, if a person is in an extreme rush, understand, for whatever, he's going to miss the plane, right? And Surah Al-Fatiha will add on a few more seconds, then he's allowed to say Subhanallah and just go down. That is permitted. Why? Because it is sunnah. Yes. Any other? Okay, now any questions from directly from you guys? No. Inshallah. Inshallah, we can now stand up and make our... Yes, okay, there's one question. If a person sneezes during salah, if he says Alhamdulillah, his salah will still be valid. Why? Because it's not interaction with out of salah, and Alhamdulillah is not necessarily contrary to salah itself. However, if another person sneezes and you say Yarhamukallah, that is interaction with the person out of salah, that will break your prayer. Interaction with anyone out of prayer will break the prayer. Sorry, interaction with anyone, yes. out of your prayer will break the prayer. Yes. Mhm. Yes, you should. First of all, asking with regard to Jama'ah, inshallah, we'll cover the Jama'ah, but I'll answer the question right now. So, if a person is performing Salah in congregation, so normally not supposed to Salah, it is our responsibility to fill the gaps, even in Salah. And thus, if a person draws our attention to filling the gaps, that is fine. If I'm the person that wants someone else to fill the gap, I may indicate with the slightest movement possible. Why? Remember, we're interacting with another person who is within my own prayer. Right? So that's valid, yes. You can move in any direction, in any amount to fill the gap. Then if we feel, there's two ways to do it. If you can do it in one single movement, then you do it in one single movement. However, if we will require, if there's so far, let's say 2 people left, right? In that case, obviously, you will not be able to jump across in one single movement. You will require 2 movements. Then you will rather make multiple, very small movements rather than 2 large movements. Why? Because with regards to Amal Kathir, you try to avoid Amal Kathir as much as possible. However, you will fill the safs even if you have to move during Salah. Yes. That's fine. Any direction. Yes. You can, even if you are praying out of Salah and you're crossing to fill the saf, you are permitted to do so. So let's say a person left from here and no one's moving. You came in late and you were standing by the door. You can cross everyone and fill that spot. That's permitted. You are allowed to cross in front of people to fill the saf. You are allowed to cross in front of people to fill the saf. And the typical situation happens in Haram. Many people just decide to make random safs in the middle of nowhere. Now, you're not going to be considerate of them. You're going to skip all of them. You can cross in front of all of them to find the closest spot to the actual place. Another question came in. If there's someone praying Salah by himself, for example, Asr, can we join him by tapping him on the shoulder? Okay, that's I wanted to cover tomorrow. If you guys can please be patient, we'll cover this inshallah tomorrow. What if I don't know the dua for Janazah Salah? What should I do? If you're praying behind the Imam, you just pray silent. If we're praying Salat al-Janazah behind the Imam, we can just stay silent, just like our normal Salah. Inshallah. Now we will start the practical demonstration. We can also make ourselves just like yesterday, inshallah. Spaced out, leave some space between each other, inshallah. On the ladies' side, I believe there's someone to guide us along, inshallah. So we'll leave the mic.
Yesterday we have completed two Qawma. So we will inshallah all assume that position of Qawma, which is our standing, then with our again toes facing forward, our hands on the side. Why? Because we are just starting up from ruku'. We would have finished saying Rabbana lakal hamd wa sami Allahu liman hamida by now, and we should be going towards sajda. So the way to do sajda, as we explained, then knees first, hands second, nose, and then forehead. So I will put my hand, go down, knees first, hands, and then open forehead. Now, I believe most people are already doing it correctly. We just stay in that position. Just want to point out a few things, inshallah. Then, if we have our hands as normal as possible, not together, not spread apart, next to our ears. If our hands are below, then we should push it up a little bit towards the other, in line with our ears. Right? Our elbows should be sticking out, especially if we're praying ourselves. It should be coming out like wings, as much as possible. Secondly, our thighs and stomach should be away, and our thighs should be as thick as possible. I think that's to both our parts here. Sometimes there's a fit to fit into the front, and then our thighs might be meant to be behind. Our toes should be facing the Qibla, pressed down on the floor, as much as possible. The pressure down should be facing the Qibla. That's our face should be towards the ground. We'll recite Subhana Rabbil A'la 3 times. There's many additional verses in Salah. Get up, then and we want to get up, as we mentioned, and we will put our hands on our thighs. I forgot to mention on the slide, so we said Subhana Rabbiyal A'la at a minimum of 3 times. There are many additional prayers that we can do, and we should do so. However, Subhana Rabbiyal A'la is the most preferred. Just like I emphasized Subhana Rabbiyal Azim yesterday from the Sunnah of Rasulullah, the same Sahabi narrated the Nabi from the Sajda was as long as his Qiyam, and yet the only thing he read was Subhana Rabbiyal A'la, showing how much significance the word Subhana Rabbiyal A'la has. Another way to understand it is actually us fulfilling the command of Allah, Sabbih isma rabbikal a'la. And just fulfilling the command by saying Subhana Rabbiyal A'la. Now, keeping our hands over there, we will go back down, and I believe we know how to do that already. We'll go on to Sajda Akhira. Qa'ad Akhira. And the Qa'ad Akhira, At-Tahiyyatu Lillahi wa Salawat. I want to emphasize, I'm going to recite the entire Tahiyyat for everyone. And so as we read along, I want everyone to notice who I'm pronouncing. Inshallah, most of us do pronounce it every now and then when we have something from something. One of the most common mistakes is people say At-Tahiyyatu Lillah. That means they tend to extend the ta. It's not the extension of that. At-Tahiyyatu Lillah. So the ha with the ya with the shut down. Ha with the ya with At-Tahiyyatu, not At-Tahiyyatu Lillah. Right? So, again, read with me. At-Tahiyyatu Lillahi was-salawatu was-tayyibatu. As-salamu alayka أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. فلا إله إلا الله. وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. Again, some of the other mazahib, if you have learned it from other asatila, then you may have learned a few extra words, التحيات المباركات الطيبات التحيات لله والمباركات, etc., etc. Those are all fine, you can continue reading, but the Hanafi mazhab prefers this sequence of words that we have just recited. Then, Allahumma salli ala, we said Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Rasul, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad kama sallayta ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. Now, you notice I said sukun in all of those words. If you read with sukun, all those words completely fine. There is no goodness, there is no mud in any of these du'as. If the person does so, alhamdulillah, but it's not even recommended to do those aspects of the deen. However, the letters should be pronounced as properly as possible to ensure no change in meaning. The last one, the dua we started, I'll recite that dua and Rabbana Atina together again. Allahumma inni zalamtu nafsi ظلما كثيرا ولا يغفر الذنوب إلا أنت فاغفر لي مغفرة من عندك وارحمني إنك أنت الغفور الرحيم. Now, as we're sitting, remember, once we have done our tahiyyat, our finger will remain in that same position. That means we'll put it down and put it down like this. And our finger will stay down till we finish our salah. Once we have said Assalamu alaikum, then we're done. So we'll say Assalamu alaikum first to our right. Now, we should ideally try to move only with our head, not our entire body. Then our head. And when we move, then we will look either to our shoulder or to anyone on the right. There is no specification, right? Who are we saying salam to? We're saying salam to the angel on our right. Rather, every being on our right. Every being on our right. And when we turn left, every being on our left. If we're behind the Imam, now, the hadith of Rasulullah specifically mentioned intention for the Imam. Anyways, to make intention, if you're on the right, then turn on the right, and the left, and if you're in the middle, those times to make intention for that Imam. Once you have done so, whether you have different people, you may have seen or may have seen some people say their head in the middle or they stop in the middle. None of those are necessarily valid. There's no need to do that. Any of those, just go on the right and then come back on the left and that's the end. You may find in some parts of the world, if you're even in America, they make the salam only one side because according to them, that is the sunnah. Nevertheless, according to us, it's nice, right, and then salam. The salah is ended by the first salam. The salah is ended by the first salam. The second salam is sunnah. The salah is ended by the first salam. So if the imam starts saying the first salam, there is no point of trying to join the salah anymore. You might as well go for your own salah, inshallah. Right? Yes, Jazakallah. Yes, okay, Jazakallah. Sitting position. We talked about it. Men and women fighting differently. For the men, I will demonstrate it. Look, for the men, when I go down, my right foot will stay up, my left foot will be down, and I will be sitting on my left foot. This is how for a men. This is the position of men when they are sitting according to Hanafi school of thought. Right? According to for women, they may sit like this or like this. In simple words, both of the feet will be coming out on the right side. Now, however, understand this. This is for the Hanafi school of thought. The other schools of thought differ. The Shafi'i school of thought depends. In the first qa'dah, they don't differentiate by men and women, they differentiate by position. So the qa'dah ula, that means the qa'dah between two rak'ahs, they will sit like this. Okay. And the qa'dah between, at the end of the salah, they will sit like this. You have to understand that there's a difference between us, and then they divide by the position, while we differentiate by the gender. Facing the qibla. Unless a person, it's not about comfort. You cannot be changed due to comfort, it can be changed due to need. Yes. And ideally, the person from youngster, first youngster may say, hey, it's tough for me. But if you don't train, what's going to happen? Every part of the salah will be difficult. The person will have to put himself with himself with the salah. So we find from the Hanafi books that we find, it's usually at the position of down. Okay. Not go. Yeah? Yeah, not down. Yeah. Any other questions? No, it's not. Yes, but yes. If you remember, when that is adding something in the salah, which is not contradictory. That means the salah, all you have to do is get up, and then because you added something, you will differentiate. Condition is we did not say anything, any human entity, we are making dua or istihad, and we expect the something within the qibla. So there is no human interaction, or human self-interaction, which is human talk, or in the truth, and in the truth that text is not coming within the sajda, you can get up and just complete that. It has to do with the person finishes the head after that is finished. Which means you have to go beyond the head. You're supposed to go to the first one, with the person goes to it. However, majority of all of the people are going to run with that are giving it everybody can be for the first one, so the people are doing that. I think it was one thing to do. I didn't stop. I think it was I don't know if it means I hope not. I think it's so slightly different between the different madhabs. Yes. The Shafi'i madhab is where you actually wait for the imam to start the second. In the Hanafi school of thought, remember, the whole idea of following the imam in the Hanafi school of thought is to follow closely with the Imam as close as possible without doing it. So I think it's as better in the but from the Shafi'i, you have to wait at least for them to actually recommend it, but you're not going to go for that, but you have to wait at least for it. So the Salam that the Muftī cannot go ahead of the Imam. No, if Muftī goes ahead of the Imam as long as he gets the Imam within every posture. So let's say he was reading, he was not focusing, and maybe in his mind he was reading too. He finished the surah and he gets Allah and then he rather stay in that position and wait for the Imam to get in that position. As long as he gets the Imam within the position, Salah is valid. However, the danger is the person goes into a ruku and he comes back up Salah is wrong. Why? Because now he added an extra complete posture, which is again contrary to that. So tomorrow we can cover in inshallah, but if I don't take figures. If you're not raising hands, it's not necessary, but saying that it's really just necessary, without raising hands, you say Allah Akbar, and then you just carry on. You do not come back. So, let's say the person read two left, and then he was going to pick up his hand and he was going to read the dua, right? And instead, he goes into the two. Okay? In that case, you just skip the whole thing, and then the next position. Right? Skip the whole thing, and why did it? Why? Because you did? Why? So you already want the next one. And then, no. There are scholars who have written that, but it's prefer to use them. They usually do it with that because the common Allah and they have it. Just by the way, I'm done with my part. If anyone wants to use them, you want to do it, you're more than welcome to use it. After Salah, no. So even from the Shafi'i method, there cannot be more than one working behind. So for example, I like the Sajda is one working, the Father is one working, and Salam is third. So this means there's one working on two on. So I think we should be using the Sajda. But once I go to Salam, and he's still in Sajda, right? You have to be at least up out of Sajda. Because once the Imam towards the end, yeah, he's around, I think,